Welcome to tonight's webinar. This webinar is on manifesting in alignment with nature. That's the title. And I'm going to open the webinar the way I usually do, which is starting with a little prayer of gratitude, followed by a little recap of what is energy healing, followed by diving into the webinar. Okay, so. Thank you to being for everything, for all the forms of consciousness which heal, for all the forms of consciousness which propitiate the flow of wisdom or knowledge. Thank you to the ancestors, everyone's ancestors. Thank you to the divine in all of us for blessing our ability to work concisely and efficiently, to dive effortlessly into the field of being and uncover the truths about manifestation tonight, and to support everyone's ability to offer all the resources Dorothy has to the field, to everybody who's here tonight, to support everyone's ability to practice energy healing like a pro, to become self-sufficient and self-sustaining. Thank you everyone for being with me. Everyone online, thank you. And everyone who's here, hi. Everyone who's here in person, thank you for being with me. And this is a fun topic. I love the topic of manifestation. But before we dive into that, I just want to do a little recap of what's energy healing. So, energy healing. Thank you. Getting all the cameras going here. Energy healing is the process of focusing attention intelligently in order to support effects, self-referral effects in the field of consciousness. Attention is consciousness, right? And our bodies are the reflection of our consciousness. And the physical material world comes from the source of creation, which is consciousness. And so the energy healing process is a process of sort of intentionally focusing awareness, focusing consciousness in a specific manner in order to give rise to an effect in the field. And of course, ultimately give rise to a specific effect with the physiology. Okay, so that's energy healing in a nutshell. Now, the other side of that picture is that it's really valuable to have a sort of a map to navigate one's way through the field of consciousness. So I've already mentioned that we've got from physical material to like fine levels of being. However, there are other navigational points of reference, including the range from the range between all the complementary pairs of opposites, the range from big to small, the range from asleep to awake. And of course, as I mentioned before, the range from very manifest to very unmanifest. So we've got all these different ranges going at the same time. All right. So that's the recap of what is energy healing. Now, every time I do a webinar, I start by, I usually have a week or 2 weeks where I'm really feeling the buildup of the information that's going to be coming out in the webinar. So this last 2-week period was no exception to that. And I really felt over the last couple of weeks that the buildup was even more sort of blissful and intense and amazing than it had been for the previous sessions. So I'm very excited to see what comes out today, and just knowing that everybody, all of us are doing this together, because my ability to speak is a reflection of everyone's ability to whatever it is that needs to come out at this time. Okay, so we're looking at the field of manifestation. So one of the premises, like I would say the most fundamental premise, is that who manifests is really being. Being manifests. Divinity manifests. So our ability as individuals to focus attention intelligently and to get our awareness in the right place to manifest our intentions very specifically is based on the relationship with divine being. That's fundamental. That's fundamental. So that's where I'd like to start today's session. And that source of creation, that deep inner silent ocean of being, which is the foundation for everything that manifests, it interfaces with time. Because ultimately, over the course of time, everything manifests. Everything that you want, everything that you intend will ultimately come to pass, whether while you're here in the body or not. At some point or another, everything happens. So, and we've got fields of interweavings of virtual realities where things have already happened and so forth. So there's a kind of a symphonic element. When I was looking at this process, I was thinking about that symphonic element and how time is an important player in that. Like in a symphony, it's everybody in the orchestra has to be on the same measure, on the same beat at the same time. Otherwise, the music doesn't come out right. So it is with the process of manifesting. We're looking at, when we think about time, we're looking at like cycles within cycles within cycles. So we've talked a lot about these cycles and about the divine dialogue, but just a little review for everybody on that account. And that is that the two elements that give rise to transformation are the field of energies which break down the relative level and the field of energies that build it up. So you've got these two strokes or these two families of natural law. You've got the destructive laws of nature and the constructive laws of nature. And I know that word destructive sometimes carries a little bit of like a negative connotation, but it's certainly, in the case of divine being, it's not negative at all. In the case of evolution, it's absolutely necessary to have the deconstruction before the new construction. So all the cycles of time have this sort of ebb and flow, that they've got their kind of destructive side and then their constructive side. And there, as I said, there's cycles within cycles within cycles. So even if the big overarching flow is on its destructive mode like that, or it's breaking down what was in order to create what will be, within that deconstruction, there will be little cycles of construction because it loops like that. So that's where our individuality comes in. There are two things here. One is that it's valuable to have a sense of where we stand in the big cycles. That's really, like, I would say, essential. So I wanted to start today's session with a healing to support everyone's ability to look into the field of the constructs of time and determine where we are in the cycles. They don't always like only at the apex and at the two ends do they kind of all line up. Otherwise, in the center, we've got different combinations where one is partly destructing and the other is partly creating and so forth. But in order to get into the field of creation and get a sense of where we're standing at any given moment in the cycles of creation, we do that through the astral level of the physiology. So coming to our map of manifestation here, we've got physical body at the top and then finer, 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 down to being, pure being at the finest level. And here at the astral body, so we're about, coming down to a very fine level of being, that's the level where we connect in with the web of life. And that's where we find our relationship with the wholeness. So I thought it would be nice to start with a healing for the astral body and opening connections between the astral body and senses of perception so that it becomes easy for everyone to find the way in to the astral body and get that read on the web of life. All right, so I'm just looking at the healing circle. We've got a nice, big, robust group of people tonight, so that's really nice. And what I'm doing, and I will always do this, is tell you what I'm doing while I'm doing it, because half the deal is understanding the underlying mechanics for what's going on. So I'm just taking a look at the astral bodies, at the astral level of our group. And when I look at the astral level of the group, I see the whole web of life. So I see our group within the context of the whole web of life. And what I'm doing is I'm feeling an impulse coming from the causal level of the physiology that is impulse of both integration, but also kind of like love and reverence. Because the principle here is that to make a nice, clean connection, it's necessary to be on a friendly basis with those aspects of creation. So what we're doing is we're making a friendly connection between our own astral bodies and the web of life. So this is the first thing, is it's like an oil that's going into the very outermost edges of the astral body. And just for those who haven't had the description, the astral body is like a round shape, a round energy field. It's a round energy space around the body. And it's kind of apple shaped in that it has a core, and then it has this nice roundness around it, and it spins. It spins this way and it spins this way, and it's the field, it's the part of the physiology that I generally associate with belief systems. As we know, the field of pure unmanifest being is everything. It's so big and it's so full, it would be overwhelming for us in any given moment if we were being sort of bombarded with the totality of creation. So between the field of being, which are these sort of deeper levels of consciousness, up through the more manifest levels of consciousness, it's all a big filtration system. Even the physiology is a filtering structure. Our nervous systems filter everything down. So we just experience one moment at a time, right? When we know time is like everything at once. Okay, so beliefs. Oh, here we go. In the astral body, beliefs. Beliefs are forms that allow us to prioritize information so that we're taking in what is the most valuable or important information at any given moment. And I'm seeing the belief systems. I'm seeing like everybody's belief systems all at once. That's a great collective. So it's a kind of a symphony. Looks like a symphony because we got a lot of stuff going on. But I'm looking into the field of beliefs. So we've got lots and lots of different beliefs going all at the same time. And within that, I'm looking for patterns. If there are any specific beliefs that will better support the junction or connection between individuality and that web of life. Because that's what we're doing right now. We want to kind of open up that edge, like the edge of the astral body, how it interfaces with the field. And one of them I already stated that it's good to kind of approach the field with a sort of friendly sense of friendship, sense of sweetness. And of course that presupposes a belief that there's something separate, that like I am going to become friends with the web of life, when in fact, it's really just one being. So, however, within the context of there being just one being, we know that even within an individual physiology or within the individual self, sometimes we're at odds with ourself, right? Like we're just one being. Dorothy's just one being, but there can be times when Dorothy is like confused or conflicted or not sure or or making some decision maybe that isn't in my best interest or whatever. So we know that even within the context of one being, of one great holistic being of creation, there can be this element of sometimes being slightly out of synchrony. And that can happen when in the divine dialogue, you've got the deconstructing laws of nature going here, but within that, there's like a little human loop going, yes, but you know what? I'm learning something new right now. So the human loop is coming up in a constructive mode while the big force is coming down like that. This is what these interfaces of the little loops inside the bigger loops are what give the whole experience its richness. So nothing's bad, but right now, the astral bodies. One of the things I'm seeing happening is very interesting, and I feel is a direct result of our group, is that there's a kind of a harmonization taking place in people's astral bodies, so that it's like, because our group is so open and because we've been working together, what we've got is there's sort of like a central sense of balance. Like if we take the collective of everybody's astral bodies together, there's it's like we can benefit from everybody's best qualities. So within the group, some people's astral bodies are already like more harmoniously connected into the web of life. And then other people's astral bodies have more like efficient belief organizations of beliefs and so forth. Like everybody's got something different to offer. So as a collective, I'm seeing this really quick kind of like chatting, kind of talking back and forth to each other. And it's like there's a kind of an evening taking place. So when I first started looking into the astral bodies, I saw like a lot of differences in our astral bodies. And now I'm looking at it and I'm seeing it starting to even out. Like smooth, it's starting to smooth. And that's good, that smooths the astral bodies. And the smoother the texture of the astral body, the more efficiently it protects the physiology from invaders, because the astral body being that first line of defense in the environment, for example, like flus and viruses and bacteria and molds and parasites and all that sort of thing, all those sorts of invaders, they know that you have an astral body and they know that your astral body is your first line of defense. And so it's natural for when the astral body has any like little textural anomalies, like a little area that's rough or a little area there's a little lesion or something like that, that creates an opening or an invitation to whatever energies might want to be invasive to the body. So the fact that as a group, we did this sharing thing that created a kind of an evenness, that also supports evening out the textures of everyone's astral body and thus supporting greater immunity. And interestingly, that goes right into the core of I said the astral body has a kind of core, right? And that goes right into the core. This whole heart area is like our deep inner core. And so the heart area starts to resonate with gratitude and sweetness and appreciation. And this is interesting. Already, even though we're just working right now on our own physiologies and how we're working kind of to integrate with the creation, I'm seeing this evenness that we've created as a collective, having I would say a gentle effect on the collective as well. That the collective consciousness, there's enough wakefulness in the collective consciousness that there are groups of people who are receiving the information created by the move that we just made in a way that supports invincibility in the groups, right? In the groups, like different places like Bosnia or Syria, different places where people are feeling invaded, where they're feeling unsafe, This resonation that we're making in our group, which is like about maybe 100 people, creates a little blueprint that goes out to that collective. And at the level of the collective, there is a degree of recognition of what we're doing. It's just very delicate. And delicate is good because it's from that point of extreme delicacy that the first movements or the first transformations of consciousness start in and are really the most powerful. Something very tender happening. It's very tender happening in the collective consciousness. And maybe it's not a coincidence that the work that we're doing tonight is also coinciding with the beginnings of many sort of large world yagyas that are starting in many countries, Asia and Europe. So I'm just feeling a lot of movement of gratitude and light and appreciation moving into and through our group. And that is moving from the denser levels, like the more emotional or feeling levels, down into the causal level of the physiology. And at the causal level, it looks like a kind of reverence or sweetness that connects our beings, our physiologies, with the source of creation. So that oiling up that was going on in the outer edges of the astral body has kind of worked its way down to a deeper level of the physiology now, and it's making connections with the source of creation. Good job, everybody. So I'm feeling that source of creation level really awake, really, really soft right now, with a lot of sort of very rich emotional, I would say, like power, rich emotional content. It's very sweet. And just about a minute ago, I was talking and I passed over something that reminded me, oh, I wanted to be sure to mention that. And I kind of was on a roll, so I passed right over it. And I'm hoping I'm just saying it, putting it out to you guys in the group. I wanted to come back because it was a significant thing that oh yeah, blueprints. We acted, okay, so we made this little loop that has to do with protection. And that little loop was like a little blueprint that was then able to move into the collective consciousness and support a finer level of connection, protection for locations on Earth, for collectives on Earth that are feeling vulnerable, that are feeling delicate, that are feeling afraid. The reason I wanted to talk about blueprints and about like templates is because I feel that they're some of the most basic forms of consciousness that we use for the manifesting process. So this brings us into taking a look at that even deeper level, even more fundamental level of consciousness, which is the causal level of the physiology. So we have the source of creation, of course, which is the source of infinite resource, infinite power, infinite material to work with. It's the seed of it. And then the causal level of the physiology, coming up a little more material there. And the causal level is where we implement those resources. Okay, so we need to look at the causal level. And then after, let's just go through it first, an overview, and then we'll go back to the causal level. So at the causal level, we've got all the resources that implement that infinite resource. And then the astral level, we start working our way through sort of filtering out and deciding what's what and what we're going to keep and what we're not going to keep. At the causal level, it's still very open, and there's still really a lot of information and just input. There's a lot of input at the causal level. At the astral level, we start filtering it. Then at the emotional level, the interpretation begins. At the emotional level, the physiology, where we start reviewing basically the heart content, the feeling content, which is it's within the context of that universal language that everything in creation speaks. So we're starting to review the emotional content. And then at the mental level, a lot more kind of filtration comes in with regards to defining the experience. At the emotional level, it's still kind of like a pure experience level, but then at the mental level, we start to define and really set up boundaries and understand what's going on. And then at the etheric level, that understanding, those boundaries start to take shape, and they start to actually look like the physiology and act like the physiology, but still not fully manifest. And then at the physical level, the whole thing gels, and we get the full manifest value of self. So that's, we could say that's kind of like a review of how that whole manifesting process bubbles up from the source of creation. But the early stages of that process are the most significant. And I want to go into a whole thing on the causal body, but I also want to come back and check and just make sure that the healing that we did for the astral body and all of our connections are good, and check into the senses of perception, because I want to make sure that we're actually experiencing, you deserve to know that you are actually experiencing your astral body and your astral body level connection to the whole rest of the field of creation. So first up on the senses of perception there is that incredible, intense sweetness that evolved out of this healing. When a healing work we do as a group and it goes out to the collective, this affects karma, and it supports the ability, our ability, to move forward faster. So causal level, where karma is. What we're doing is we're looking into the causal level, and we're checking with, for everyone, any karma that might be sitting at the causal level that might inhibit the capacity to perceive this astral level of creation. And one of the first things I'm seeing is there's a little fear in there. There's a little underlying fear down at the causal and astral level. Because, of course, as I mentioned, that whole area is taking in a huge amount of information from the absolute. And so there's that feeling of, oh, well, I don't want to be overwhelmed. Thank you very much. I like my filtration systems. They're useful. They stop me from, having too much adrenaline activity in the physiology or something. So this is one reason why the earlier part of the healing was designed to support safety. So what comes in is good stuff. And I'm seeing that working its way in, integrating its way in at a deeper level into the causal and astral levels of the physiology, that it's an organization, for some people in the group, an organization of the belief system, so that everything is like synchronized a little better, so that the beliefs fit together in a nice, like a puzzle-like pattern, so that there aren't any gaps, and that the maximum efficiency, that the whole belief area of the system is functioning with maximum efficiency. And that comes from a template. Good thing I mentioned templates. There are, in the cosmic regions of creation, accessible through the causal body, there are places like archives of useful information. I found resources, a lot of useful information with regards to energy healing. And of course, this is another reason why we want to get our astral body interfacing with the larger field of life, so that everybody has access to those archives all the time. But in there are templates for the most efficient organization of the causal and astral, particularly astral levels of the physiology, so that the belief system doesn't disagree with itself. That's the main thing. In the creation, there are destructive and constructive laws of nature. So for every law of nature that says, oh, the reality is going to build up this way, there's another law of nature that says, well, the reality is going to fall down that way. So there are like opposing pairs of energies, and what we need to do is I'm just seeing what's happening. It's very interesting. It's organizing. The belief systems are organizing themselves according to basically sacred geometry and creating a sort of a mandala-like organization in the astral and causal bodies. Oh, this is very yummy. This is so interesting, guys. You're doing this. I'm just reporting it. Anyway, so if the beliefs organize themselves according to like families of beliefs and sets of beliefs that coordinate, then they can be arranged in a pattern throughout the astral body, which is already a kind of a mandala shape anyway, right? Sort of like a multidimensional mandala like that. And so they can organize themselves within the context of this geometrical shape so that the exact opposites are sitting across from each other and acting like what they're doing is they're supporting the ability for awareness to maintain structure or stability right in the core of self, right in the core of self. And I know we've done these exercises in the past where we do like body scans during our webinars. This might be a good moment for a body scan. Actually, let's just do that because this is the healing that's happening. So we want to like get into it. We want to feel it. So we're just going to take a moment. I'll quiet down just a little bit here. Bring my mic over just a little bit. I know that looks a little funny, but you can hear me better. Let the awareness feel into the very core of the body. And then right into the core of the Hriddya Mahamarma, the heart chakra area. Right into the core there. That's the center of the center of the center. And on that point, there is a balance for all the complementary pairs of opposites. So what we're doing is we are appreciating that point in our own being. The body is the most wonderful, brilliant expression of divinity. So precious, so exquisite. And on that point, balance itself is folding in on its own nature, right in that point in the heart. So the balance is balanced, and balance is knowing balance, and balance is the balance of its own nature. So all the balances of all the complementary pairs of opposites can find a home, can find a common ground in that spot. It's so silent. It's so sacred. It's so beautiful. The silence is so sweet. It's so thick. It's like a kind of, I feel as if just doing that exercise, again, it's connecting us because we're a big collective, right? It's connecting us with a sort of a balance point in creation, a sort of universal balance point. We could say like at the center sun, you know, a sort of central location balance. And a lot of information is coming in, download from the center sun. As a result of these physiologies aligning, that means energy resonation in the center of the body, same. It's like you could say it's at a different octave, because at the universal level, it's like, oh, and then we're like, but it's the same note. It's the same actual basic resonation. It's like a great, you know, an overtone. It's an overtone of that deep. Oh. You can tell I'm not really the singer in the family, but that's okay. You get the idea. So what that's doing is it's showing us, we created as a collective this little example to show ourselves, or you could say divinity through us. Divinity is showing itself through us how we make the connection between that central point in our own physiologies and the collective. That it's, think of it like a portal. I mean, I was actually thinking that when I was thinking, God, it's so silent, it's so lusciously silent, that it's like a doorway or a portal to the whole field of the collective. And so I'm looking at the group, I'm feeling in the group. Okay, so what we've got is each individual physiology in that center of the body has got the resonation going there. And then the group as a whole has its own sort of energetic center where there's like a deeper octave of it going. So we've got multiple octaves going, and they, of course, enhance each other's power. I'm looking to see if there's another octave level, and I'm seeing that there's one at a solar system level, that our planets, they know this. They know what we just discovered, which is that they also can work together to create a kind of a central in the sun. That's so interesting because we're also working with the center sun, but our sun also acts as a sort of a resonating node in this system of experience. Oh, that's so interesting. So like, I'm seeing awareness just going into our sun, into the center of our sun. It's a huge storehouse of information just there, just in the sun alone, huge storehouse of information. And again, I'm feeling from our side, and we are so tiny compared to that, but from our side, this very sweet energy of like gratitude and appreciation and reverence and understanding. The understanding comes from structuring our physiologies in alignment with that energy. So it's not like you say, oh, thank you, son, I love you. It's that you are the essence of that just by making that alignment. You can always do it. I mean, once we do it in the webinar, then you know how the process goes, right? It's simple. Then you can just do it. You can just, anytime you can like zero into that heart center area and recognize a point of balance that brings together all the, you can double check the belief system. And I suggest, and I see people doing this, but I suggest for those, so that it's consciously aware that you're doing this, that we do it now in waking consciousness, then we do it again in dream consciousness, and again in sleep consciousness, giving ourselves 3 different perspectives to look at what we're doing so it integrates. Integration is so important in this process. Oh, in energy healing, integration is so important, right? Anybody can have a flash. Anybody can have a, you know, a sudden like, oh, wow, I think I get the whole creation. But it doesn't last unless it's integrated. It's not owned unless it's integrated until it's matured or ripened in the being. So it has to become part of the physiology. I'm looking at points in the physiology where that balance plays an essential role, and one of them is in the brain, right? In the corpus callosum that connects the 2 halves of the brain, there's that element of balancing 2 opposites or 2 complementary, the complementary pair of the right and left hemispheres of the brain. Okay, and definitely feeling that. Again, let's give ourselves a second, because it's good for us to go in these nice little waves back and forth between experience and understanding. Everybody knows where the corpus callosum is, right? It's kind of like deep in the brain, right in the center, and kind of deep down. You have to think of it kind of not, the 2 hemispheres of the brain are actually separate up at the top area. But when we go down into the brain, deep in the brain, there's this area that connects. And it's very interesting because you've got the corpus callosum, and then you've got like the 3rd ventricle, 3rd and 4th ventricles of the brain, which are actually spaces. But the spaces also connect, which reminds me, I was going to do a whole section on the causal body, which we will get to in just a minute. But for right now, let's do this as an exercise. I think it'll be good to do it, and that will help us create a foundation of understanding for the next part of the talk. So just quietly take a moment, and we're just doing this. This is energy healing. We're putting our attention, we're focusing it on the corpus callosum. Now we have that center balance here in the heart, but now we've got a center balance here too. So we've got 2 points of center balance, right? So the 2 points, both in the awareness, create an axis between them of intercommunication. It is very common that the two halves of the brain will give conflicting information. That is common. Everybody has that. It's good to have more than one perspective on everything. And I'm just feeling that energy. All it's like it is the longer the awareness stays in the corpus callosum and the third and fourth ventricles, the more it kind of like warms up the area, wakes up the area. It does several things. One of the things it's doing is it helps to create balance in that part of the body. We have organs that are really important for balance, like the hypothalamus, pituitary, right? Arcuate nucleus. Can't leave that out. That balances appetite. And that means appetite for everything, even knowledge. Anything you want or long for. It balances that ability for both the desire to expand and get more, and also the desire to integrate what we've got. So it has to do both. We have to do both. And I'm just feeling that like deep in that third ventricle of the brain. I'm just feeling it's like a little wave of consciousness is moving back and forth like that in the third ventricle. And it's with each little flop of the wave, more balance is created. More balance is created. And I'm asking, can that little wave that creates balance go all the way back to the source of creation? Can it like find its root in the source of creation? So that the source of creation is infinite, right? So when it goes back into the root, it finds infinite balance. So soft. It's so soft. It's so good. It's so good. I don't know about you guys. Well, I kind of know a little bit about everybody, a little bit. Thank you guys for being with me. But what I'm seeing happening is this deep inner brain balance is communicating through these physiologies. It's when we took it back to the source of creation, we connected it with the entire field of our consciousness. So not just physical body. We were putting attention, we're starting at the physical level, but then we're working it down into the finer levels of self. And as we did that, it started touching other physiologies that you have occupied. Yeah, we've all occupied lots of physiologies, right? But some of the past physiologies, they didn't understand about balance. And they didn't understand about, particularly with regards to this arcuate nucleus of appetite, and how much do I want and how much I can get like that. In that area, I'm seeing something happening through time. And I'm really glad that this point is coming up about time, because we kind of started with the field of time, and I'm glad we're kind of looping around. It's interesting, on our time, on our hour, we're kind of like, you know, at a certain point in the hour, and we're looping back into this concept of time, and how the previous physiologies, they held like different sets of beliefs based on desire and experience and impressions and sensations and the constructs of their lives. And in there, this is part of the integration, is that the integration of the balance in the third ventricle of the brain is so completely, deeply embedded, not just in the physicality of the body, but in the etheric body and mental body and emotional body and so forth, that even the past physiologies are able to benefit from this degree of balance, integrated balance, that is what's happening, that speaks to the heart center. Like, as soon as we did that axis, right, between the center of the brain and the center of the heart, of course, naturally is kind of, ebullient, and it's just, the flow of love is going. But this is the reply from the brain back to the heart, which is, I can witness my desire. I can witness my longings. I can witness even my evolution. I can witness everything that's good about the evolutionary transformation of my being. Whether that means becoming wealthier, or becoming more powerful, or becoming more important, or famous, or if it means just being fed, or if it means relationships with structures in the environment that will grip a person, right? Like addictions, because what it's doing is it's showing our bodies are teaching themselves right now. This is the best kind of integration. They're teaching themselves to witness everything. Wow. Good. This is good. It's ungripping you. It's ungripping. And as that's happening, I was saying earlier how we have to think about what we manifest in terms of the greater whole, and where's cosmic evolution, in terms of, like, say, I want to manifest something. I want to manifest lots of flowers in my garden, or something like that. Something pleasant, but it's winter, and so that's not going to happen very well. But if I do it in the springtime, then I'm in better luck, right? So we have to always look at it in context of the whole. Okay. So this integration that's happening, that's moving through past. Do you have a question? Yes. Okay. I'm thinking best way to deal with questions. I only see yes, my dear.
How does time shift for manifestation relate to what you said about the flower example? For instance, if you want a bunch of flowers, but it's winter, oh, now it's spring. Because that's the type of manifestation. You just wake up and now it's spring. You're in that reality. So what's the mechanic or interface between the desire being so in tune that it jumps through time or swims through time versus you needing to be grounded in this time?
Thank you. So the question has to do with time and manifestation. Thank you. It's beautiful. I don't know if I can say exactly word for word the way the question was asked, but basically he's saying, like, how do we organize the belief? I'm gonna reword it. And then tell me if I'm wrong. Okay. The belief system in such a way that when the desire comes up, oh, you heard the question. Oh, good. Lady in Utah heard your question pretty well, but yeah, good. When the desire, a lot of people, everybody heard the question. Good, beautiful, resonant voice carries. Woo! We like that. Like those big, beautiful, resonant voices. Yeah, so I love that point that you said, like, how does awareness swim through time or translate through time in order to have the desire at the time that the whole creation can bolster up that desire and support it, so it just happens really spontaneously and naturally. Great question. So first of all, there's a structure at the causal level of creation which specifically interfaces with time. And I promised everyone we were going to talk about that like half an hour ago, and we still haven't gotten there. So maybe this is a good time to go into that. So there is that. And I use the Sanskrit name of that just because I love Sanskrit, because it incorporates name and form. You get the Sanskrit name, and that also contains the form. And the Sanskrit name for that form is Kalabhairava, Lord Kalabhairava. That's the form of, it's in Vedic terms, it's an aspect of Lord Shiva that is responsible for time, for time. And that aspect of self resides as a feature of the causal body. And so, no time, only now. Oh yeah, God bless you. God bless you. From Utah, we've got the wisdom of my dear friend in Utah saying that there is no time, there's only now. And I bet you he has a probably brilliant, one of these times, Michael, you should like come join me for a webinar. I bet you'd give him some good answers, huh? Anyway, we'll bring it all together at some point in time. Yeah, there is an eternal now, which every time that the being experiences now, so it experiences every now in the same laws of nature of now, where all the past and future virtualities come together, they collapse onto the present moment. And so that's sort of a universal experience for all times. Even if we think in terms of, well, in my past when I was 5 years old, I had my now experience when I was 5 years old. And at that time, I experienced the exact same laws of nature that I'm experiencing in this collapsed moment, because it was a collapse of past and future. So that you could think of that construct where the past and future, the virtual past and futures collapse into the present moment as a particular feature, like a law of nature or a universal structure. And so through that universal structure, it's possible to access all the other nows. So that's one way of working the process. So for example, I do love flowers in my garden, not gonna lie. And even in the wintertime, I don't stop loving flowers in my garden. But the thought about the flowers and the action steps for the flowers, that doesn't tend to come out until the spring. And then, it sits like virtually, it sits underlying. And then when the spring starts to come up, the specific laws of nature of the spring support the activation of those thoughts and actions that are related to the cultivation of flowers. Does that answer the question? Kind of?
No.
No, we'll ask it again. Ask it again.
So, what is the process of manifestation by which time will work to support the desire, as opposed to the desire stemming from riding a wave of time, say, like the flowers, you're riding the spring wave.
Right.
But
rather to actually bend time to accommodate your desire, rather than you bending your desire to accommodate time. Is that what you're saying? Okay, good. That's good. Okay, so that actually segues beautifully into this section on the causal body. Because as I mentioned, there's the laws of nature that implement all of our desires sit at that causal level, that very finest relative manifest level. So we need to look at that under the microscope a little bit more completely in order to effectively answer this question. Now, in previous webinars, I mentioned how the causal level of the physiology is the collective level of the physiology. And we can think of the collective level of the physiology in terms of the collective of, say, all the laws of nature, or all the levels of being that have mastery over natural law. So all the laws of nature, or those structures which implement the laws of nature, or realms. So I've talked about all these different things, but I'd like to present the causal body in a slightly different light this time to help make it simpler and more easily accessible. So we can think of two functions. One function is resonation or vibration, like humming. The other function is the space in which the resonation resides. And I took a long, deep look into this last week and had some long, kind of complex conversations with my son, with whom I have these conversations, as you all well know. So, and one of the points that came out in those conversations was, at first I was saying, well, you've got a vibration and then you've got a resonating space. And the nature of the vibration and the nature or shape of the resonating space determine the outcome. They determine like what manifests from that finest relative level. But we looked and looked, and it seems that the space itself resonates. So it's not like we really have two separate forms. We really have one thing that it's a little bit like quantum particles. Are they waves or are they particles? You know, well, if you look at them from one perspective, they're waves. And if you look at them from another perspective, they're particles, which I think is where my son was coming from. He's got that scientific bent. So the spaces resonate. Now, at the causal level of the physiology, we don't look so much like people. We look more like forms, universal forms or structures. There are lots of sacred geometrical forms in that area. There are very delicate functions that are taking place there. And I'd say the functions, so I was looking at, okay, we've got spaces of all different types, and we can organize the spaces according to the axis of large to small, right? So we can understand that if the space is what's resonating, then let's start with the spaces and see if we get some understanding. And so there's a great overarching, the whole space of the whole universe, right? So that would be like the space of the mother of the universe. And then within that, it divides into smaller spaces and smaller spaces and smaller spaces and smaller spaces. So you get down to little spaces like the space that your astral body occupies, or the space of a room, or the space inside your stomach, or, you know, little spaces, lots of spaces. So, but they're subtle because they're at the causal level, right? So they're not like, when they divide, what happens is the spaces take on a flavor or a feeling. Sometimes I call them energy signatures. Just like a building. Everybody knows we've walked into a place, or there's maybe some place that you know from your childhood, or maybe even just a place out in the forest that you love that has its own like special energy signature flavor. So all the spaces have this. All these spaces at the causal level, from great big spaces down to little tiny delicate, the space inside my mouth has its own little energy quality to it, which is unique to that space. So from big to small, the spaces reside. When a space hums, it goes into a dynamic condition that supports manifestation. When the space hums, it does that. So what makes a space hum? I realized what makes a space hum is the application of awareness. So suppose there's somebody you love, but you don't know if they love you, but you know you love them. So there's a space for that relationship. There's a sacred inner space where you and that other person are not separate from one another. You're together. And awareness can move into that space. And as it does so, it like wakes up and enlivens that space and starts to nurture the space. It starts to heal the space. It starts to fulfill the space, to create wholeness there. And when the space starts to hum like that, it causes you and that person to get closer. That's why, okay, now we're coming to the question that just came up. That's why a lot of times when we're functioning really in sync with our environment, you think about someone, it's like, I need to talk to that person, and the phone rings and it's that person. And they're like, oh, I dialed the wrong number. I'm like, yeah, but I really needed to talk to you. You know? So it's like that going into the space and activating it with awareness wakes it up. So awareness is that aspect of the structure of this at this causal level that makes the difference between a silent space just sitting in its resting mode to a space that's humming and vibrant and alive and manifesting, forming the foundation for manifesting anything. So with regards to intention, because I like this question because it's actually sort of touching on the idea of really clear intention. Like, we have a situation that's not working and it's manifested up not working. So we want to change it with transformation, basically, you know, like maybe it is the middle of winter, but maybe we can have a flower bloom anyway, you know, like to be able to like work with the laws of nature in such a way that intentions can manifest even if the environment isn't like wholly or solely deeply supportive of it at the time. Or even, and I'd say this applies to the case of energy healing, a lot of times if someone's dealing with an illness, it's like they're on a train that's rolling down the tracks and it's moving in a certain direction of, say, deterioration of some part of the physiology. How do we bring awareness in when those laws of nature of deterioration are rolling along? You know, they've kind of got some momentum behind them, and turn that train around and bring the physiology back to health. When all the laws of nature are kind of pushing up against a certain expression, then it's necessary to work with natural law at a level that's very deep, that's like deeper than the laws of nature, or that it's at least holistic enough that it incorporates all the different factors that are going into that particular situation or circumstance. And so this is where one of the valuable tools of energy healing come in, to be able to go into a challenging situation and break it down and analyze it for its constituent parts. Because when we can open up those parts, then we can deal with them sequentially, one at a time. Here's another question. Would nature answer your desire, but in a slightly different way? Desire flowers in garden? Would nature bring you flowers? Either a bouquet of flowers coming to you, or you're offered a trip to a place where there are flowers in the garden? Good question. Good question. And the answer is absolutely. Because in the end, the whole reason for anything to happen is for the sake of divinity experiencing deeper and deeper integration and connection with the relative. So if the desire arises for flowers, it does so because flowers are that quality, that expression at the level of the relative that fulfills some need of the moment for evolution. And this brings us to, I think, a really important point when it comes to energy healing or any aspect of this working with the energy healing process. And that is, the better we can sort of hone in and refine our own sense of perception, the more quickly and efficiently the lessons integrate into the physiology. And it's not necessary to go through a long, involved physical entanglement in the relative in order to learn a lesson, but that the lesson just comes and it's sweet and it's easy and it fulfills very quickly. And something that could have resulted in a big suffering is instead, it just manifests very gently and efficiently. And then we can move on to the next lesson. So that's one of the, that kind of ties into this early point of today's talk, which was the process of refining or honing senses of perception so that the relationship between the astral body and the field of creation is appreciated, is recognized clearly, is revealed and illuminated. Revealed and illuminated. So here I'm just going into the field of silence. And I'm asking for clearing for all the senses of perception at their finest level. And what I'm seeing is an interface with the elements, because we have the physical body and the minerals and the water and the digestive fluids and all the parts of the body. Every part of our body has the capability to be sensitive and to provide a perspective on the whole creation, not just the senses of perception, but the whole body. When you go to the store, your pinky toe knows you're going to the store. It doesn't have eyeballs, but it knows, right? Your hair knows, right? So the whole physiology is this great sort of sensitive antenna of creation. And that is comprised of the 5 elements. And the 5 elements have their finer structure, the tanmatras. And these subtler structures of the 5 elements are not only fundamental to the gross senses of perception, but they are intimately resonant with the entire environment. So the field of creation is also, we access, again, like a portal, we access the universal level of creation through the subtle elements. Just like we access the material level of creation through our physiology, which is made of the gross elements, right? So awareness is going to that level of the tanmatras, which are fundamental to all the senses of perception. And there, what I'm seeing looks like we are at a very fine level of the astral level of creation, kind of bordering between astral and causal levels of creation. Right there, there's an entire system. The world looks like a system of threads, like threads of light, everything connecting, beautiful gossamer type of threads. And the threads, and this is where my son and I disagree in our talk, but it's my perception that this fine level of creation is very much awake within its own nature, that it's sentient. And he's like, no, it can't be sentient. I'm like, yeah, it can. He's like, you have to prove it. And I'm like, prove it? You are correct. Oh, I've got validation from Utah. Yes, thank you. Now we've just got to figure out some kind of science experiment to prove it. And then a guy will believe me. Anyway, the thing is, sentience takes on lots of forms. And what we interpret as sentience through the human physiology may or may not actually be exactly the way a leaf of grass feels sentient, or a fundamental particle of creation feels sentient, or whatever. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. The statement here is, his rise in consciousness will prove it to him. Well, that's pretty much inevitable, I think. So we should be okay, knock on wood. Anyway. All right. So the tanmatras, senses of perception, seeing an opening right out through the crown of the head of the tanmatras. And it's not, they don't sit like static in the physiology, they flow in the physiology. They flow through the astral body. They flow down into the fine levels of the astral body. And then within them, there are specific laws of nature that oversee and administrate their function. And those also are activating at the causal level of physiology. So I'm feeling kind of like a welling up of energy or power at the causal and astral levels of the physiology. And it's very sort of reverent acknowledgement of this part of self, sort of five-fold structure. Just like, they're like essences, of flavors of the different elements, the flavors of them. This awakening is coming like a download to the intellect. And as that happens, it actually refines the intellect as it comes in. Oh, that's beautiful. Nice, everybody. Nice job. You're doing that. And again, I'm feeling like the center of self responds with that gratitude and appreciation and reverence. It's very beautiful. Beautiful. So I'm letting that settle, and I'm just offering to being that it integrates very quickly. We get the integration of that going on, because I feel that this integration of the understanding of the fine structure of the elements and the refinement of intellect as a byproduct of putting attention on it is extremely useful and has the potential to lead us into a lot of really interesting places, both in our webinar and in our life. We're getting close to, define tanmatras. Yes, I did my best to define, but I define again. They are the underlying essence of the 5 elements. They are deeper. The 5 senses relate to the 5 elements, right? So let's see. Sense of smell is earth. Sense of taste is water. Sense of sight is fire. Sense of touch is air. And sense of hearing is space. But at a deeper level than that, where these senses of perception and the 5 elements kind of emerge from a central core or a deeper function that's behind both of them, and that is the tanmatras, which are the flavor essences, if you will. And I don't know, maybe that's not the best word to use, but it's a word. The flavor essences of the elements and the senses. It's where the elements and the senses unite. And where the elements and senses unite, it activates intellect, because the intellect understands how the eyes see or how the ears hear based on their interface with, like the eyes interface with photons. And it's the interface between the organ of the eyes and the photons that gives rise to sight. Yes? Okay, I hope that helps. Here's another anonymous comment. Nothing happens without divine approval. Oh yes, I wanted to talk about that. It seems the answer is to gain divine support, and then you can receive support at all times. Oh, so yes. Oh, you know what? I couldn't have said it better myself. In fact, I even thought of saying that earlier today. I'm like, oh, I'm going to say that at the webinar. And you said it. You said it. That was really good. I am impressed. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. In the ultimate, or I would say the most fundamental, the most important thing that we do is cultivate the connection between individuality and divinity. Because you're right, divine is doing everything through us, as us, with us, around us. And that relationship, when that relationship is like fully integrated, then the awareness is there that this is the mechanic of what's happening. And when the awareness is there, it has an activating effect, not unlike the little spaces, but the whole space of the whole creation. The whole creation activates when that happens. So that's the underlying premise, is that at that point, every act that we perform integrates divine embodiment into the being, into the physiology, into the individual experience. So the individual experience knows more and more and more. I am divine, I am divine, I am divinity, I am divinity, being individual. And being all the individuals, because the more it integrates, then it's like, oh, well, I'm this individual and I'm this individual and this, because I'm really like the whole kit and caboodle, right? So then all the points in the creation start working together, and that actually brings us to our hour. But at the same time, it brings me to another idea that I wanted to explore with you guys. So I'm thinking maybe tomorrow it would be nice to kind of step off where we left off here, and that is to look into the way the way an intention that we bring forward to manifest, the way it interfaces with all the different nodes in creation that are working together like an engine to support the manifesting process, to support the intention coming to the surface as an actual form. And we definitely need to look into that whole area. So let's do that tomorrow since we've come to our hour. But I want to thank everybody. And I think there's like another question that I missed. Concept. Yes. And one dear lady says, tanmatras are the concept of the senses. Nice. And also over here, Vedic science scholar, finest object of the senses.
Like rupa, form, and odor.
Like rupa, which is form, and odor, which is like smell, which is like the earthy.
The essence is earth.
I see. So you've got smell, which means you're bringing in actual little molecules of odor into the face, into the sinus cavities. And then rupa is form, is like the essence of form. And so that would be like the finer form. That would be the finer value of the odor. Of sight?
Rupa is form.
Right.
Relates to the senses.
I would say it maybe also relates to some of the others too. Yes. Okay, time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all your sweetness and wonderfulness. It was really fun to do this, and we've got some directions to take tomorrow morning. I'm so grateful to everyone for being with me, and I'm really excited about tomorrow. And we'll see you all then. Have a great night. Bye. Oh, for the Europeans, good morning. Bye.